Chapter 3. When I locked my daughter inside the wardrobe, she was still laughing happily, thinking it was all just a game. Who would have thought that confinement would last 20 years? I don't know, but I do know one thing. 20 years ago, I was the one who locked her inside that wardrobe, and 20 years later, she came back looking for me. She wants to take me with her. Take me to that dark place. Take me to that wardrobe where she spent 20 years. She was pulling me forward. My feet barely touched the ground, as if I were walking on cotton. Just as we were about to enter the bedroom, her hand suddenly let go. Shouty turned around and looked at me. That innocent and pure smile appeared on her face again. "Dad, it was a joke," she said, laughing before running back to her room. She slammed the door shut, leaving me alone in the hallway covered in cold sweat. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind filled with her icy hands and those words. I kept turning everything over and over in my head. How could a living person have no body temperature? But she had been right there in front of me, jumping around, talking and laughing exactly the same as 20 years ago. I raised my hand and looked at my palm. That piercing cold sensation was still there, as if it had been carved into my flesh, impossible to shake off. At 3 in the morning, crying woke me up. It was a very soft sound, broken and distant, as if it were coming from far away. I held my breath and listened carefully. It was the sorrowful crying of a woman. It made my hair stand on end. I got up, and the sound continued. It was coming from Shaudia's room. The door was slightly open, and a dim light seeped through the crack. I carefully pushed the door open and looked inside. I saw Shaudia kneeling on the floor, speaking toward the corner of the room. Between sobs, she said, "Mom, I'm back. They don't remember me anymore. They only remember my brother." Her voice trembled, but the most horrifying thing was that the corner was empty. There was nothing there, only the shadow cast by the moonlight. "Mom, are you cold inside the wardrobe? I'll stay with you. I don't want to stay here anymore." As she said this, she began crawling toward the corner. Her body twisted unnaturally like a spider, moving on both hands and feet, her head tilted to one side. Terrified, I stepped backward. My foot creaked against the floor. Shaudia turned her head. Suddenly, the moonlight illuminated her face. I saw 2 streams of bloody tears flowing from her eyes down her cheeks. She smiled innocently. "Dad, you can't sleep either? Do you want to come stay with Mom?" she said while pointing toward the corner. I looked where she was pointing, and the sight froze my blood. There was a figure in the corner. It looked like a woman. She was wearing the same flowered shirt from 20 years ago, her hair disheveled, her face covered in bruises. She stared directly at me. Slowly, she raised her hand and pointed at my neck. Instinctively, I lowered my head. Somehow, a red mark had appeared on my neck, like the imprint of fingers, thin and long, wrapped around my throat. When I looked up again, the figure had disappeared. Shaudia was gone too. The room was empty. Only a puddle of blackish water remained in the corner, as if something had melted there. I rushed into the room and searched frantically for Shaudia. She had vanished as if the earth had swallowed her whole. I bolted out of the room and checked every corner of the house. Nothing in the living room, nothing in the bathroom, nothing on the balcony. Finally, I found her in the kitchen. She was standing in front of the cutting board with a knife in her hand, slicing something in the air. Knife up, knife down. She cut with complete concentration. There was nothing on the board, but she acted as if she were cutting something solid. I called out, "Shaud, what are you doing?" She turned her head with a smile, still holding the knife. "Mom says she's hungry. I'm making food for her." "Where's your mother?" "She wasn't in your room." She pointed to the empty air beside her. "Here, Mom came, Dad. Talk to her." Tilting her head, she leaned toward the empty space and listened carefully for a while, as if someone were truly speaking to her. Then she turned back to me, still smiling. "Dad, Mom says she hates you." My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the floor. Shaudia kept cutting, the knife hitting the board with a dull sound that echoed clearly through the night. I couldn't speak. I trembled uncontrollably. Shaudia continued chopping. "Talk, talk, talk." Every strike felt like a hammer pounding against my heart. "Mom says she'll come see you every night when you're asleep. She stands beside your bed and looks at your neck. She says your neck is very soft, that one squeeze would snap it." Instinctively, I covered my neck. The red mark still burned faintly. Shaudia suddenly stopped cutting. She turned her head and looked at me. Her smile under the dim light looked especially sinister. "Dad, don't be afraid. Mom says that when you go with her, she'll forgive you." After saying that, humming a song, she continued cutting. Talk, 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 talk. Somehow I managed to stand up. Holding onto the wall, I backed out of the kitchen, my eyes fixed on the knife in Shaudia's hand. When I reached the kitchen door, Shaudia suddenly said something out of nowhere. "Is my brother sleeping well?" The moment she said that, the knife slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a metallic clang. I turned and ran toward my room. I slammed the door shut and barricaded it with bedding. For a long time, I struggled to catch my breath, until I suddenly remembered that my son wasn't home. He had stayed the night at my mother-in-law's house. So what had Shaudia meant by that sentence? Just as I was thinking about it, I heard footsteps in the hallway, very, very light. They came closer step by step until they stopped outside my door, then came knocking. Talk, talk, talk. It wasn't a hand. It sounded like metal striking wood, like a knife. Shaudia's voice came from the other side of the door. "Dad, open up. Mom wants to come in and see you." I didn't move. I didn't dare make a sound. The knocking continued. Talk, talk, talk. Louder each time. More insistent each time. Suddenly it stopped. After a few seconds of silence, another voice spoke. A woman's voice, hoarse and deep, as if it came from the bowels of the earth. "Wen Donggu, open the door. It's me. I've come back." I recognized that voice. It was Lin Shulin's. But Lin Shulin was sleeping beside me. I whipped my head toward the bed. Thankfully, she was still there, deeply asleep. Then who was outside? The voice faded away. I didn't dare think anymore. I was drenched in cold sweat. I stayed frozen behind the door until the first rays of light came through the window. That night, I heard nothing else. Lin Shulin slept soundly all night, and her calm breathing comforted me a little by by dawn. At sunrise, I decided to visit the divination master. He had been the one who predicted that my daughter wanted to come home. After everything that had happened, only he could tell me what to do. Without saying anything to Lin Shuland, I left the house alone and followed the address to the master's home. It was an old apartment building. A bagua mirror hung at the entrance. When I knocked on the door, Master Shi's expression changed instantly the moment he saw me. He stood blocking the entrance, refusing to let me in, saying the family was incomplete and I shouldn't have come. I stared at him. Master, something happened. He observed me silently for a long time. Finally, he sighed and let me inside. The house smelled strongly of sandalwood. All kinds of talismans hung on the walls. I told him everything from the previous night word for word, including Shadi's return, how she had spoken toward the corner in the middle of the night, the bloody tears on her face, the woman I saw in the corner, and the red mark on my neck. After listening to me, the master remained silent for a long time. His expression grew darker and darker. He paced around the room before finally stopping in front of me. Lowering his voice, he said, "Your daughter doesn't want to come home. She wants to take all of you with her. She has been dead for 20 years. Her resentment is too great. She has returned to drag her whole family into the other world and reunite everyone down there." My head buzzed. All strength left my body. I asked him if there was any way to solve it. The master thought for a moment and then said, "Yes, there is one way. Tonight at midnight, take Shoudi's birth information to the place where she was locked up. Burn 3 incense sticks, bow 9 times, and say, 'Daughter, rest in peace. Dad was wrong.' Then bring her memorial tablet home and place it on an altar. Perhaps then this karma can be resolved." I thanked him repeatedly and returned home. I prepared the candles, incense paper, and Shadi's birth information. As soon as night fully fell, I drove alone back to the old village. The entire way there, my heart pounded wildly. I couldn't stop thinking about the master's words. By the time I reached the village entrance, it was almost 11. The whole village was pitch black, without a single light. Feeling my way through the darkness, I entered the old house and opened the door to the small storage room. A wave of cold, damp air hit my face. It was even colder than the night before, so cold that I began shivering. I turned on my flashlight and pointed it toward the basement entrance. That black, deep hole looked like a mouth waiting to devour me. Clenching my teeth, I descended into the basement. It was even colder down there. My breath turned to frost. I swept the flashlight around and saw the iron wardrobe in the corner, its doors wide open, revealing nothing but darkness inside. Carrying the incense sticks, paper, and offerings, I approached the wardrobe. My legs were so weak I could barely stand. I lit the incense sticks and planted them into the ground. Then I lit the paper. Dropping to my knees, I began bowing. 1, 2, 3. With every bow, I repeated the same phrase in my mind. "Daughter, rest in peace. Dad was wrong." When I reached the 9th bow, I suddenly heard faint footsteps behind me. Dull sounds against the dirt floor. I spun around and shined the flashlight. Nothing. Everything was empty. I turned back to continue bowing. The moment I lowered my head, I felt something behind me, staring intensely. That feeling of being watched crept up my spine to the back of my neck. Slowly, I turned my head toward the wardrobe. Inside the wardrobe, a pair of eyes stared back at me. White eyes without pupils, locked onto me. Terrified, I scrambled away on all fours, scattering the incense sticks and paper everywhere. The flashlight slipped from my hands. Blindly, I searched for the basement exit, clawing at the dirt with my hands and feet, my nails digging into the earth. When I finally reached the exit, I realized it was blocked. I stretched out my hand and touched a cold stone slab. Shining the flashlight on it, I saw engraved words. "Tomb of Chase Audie." Desperately, I began pounding on the stone, screaming for help until my voice went hoarse. No one answered. Behind me came a creaking sound. It was the wardrobe door. Footsteps approached one after another. "Sss, sss," a voice whispered right beside my ear. "Didn't you come to burn paper? Why don't you look back?" I froze, unable to turn my head. I lay there without even daring to breathe. The footsteps slowly moved away. I stayed there lying on the ground for a very, very long time until finally I couldn't take it anymore and slowly turned my head. Standing in front of the wardrobe was a person.